The judge's gavel struck, and just like that, I was disinherited. My own children, the ones I'd sacrificed a lifetime for, had legally erased me. They thought they had left me with nothing but broken memories, but what they didn't know was that Arthur, in his final act, had already made sure I held the ultimate trump card. Before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe while you're listening, and let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. Now, take a breath and listen closely. This is my story. The judge's gavel struck like a death knell, echoing not in the solemn courtroom, but in the desolate chambers of my heart, shattering the very foundation of my life. Disinherited. By Gary. By Brenda. My own children. The word itself, cold and final, clung to the stale air of my living room, thick with the scent of old paper and dust, tasting like bitter ash on my tongue. I sank into the plush armchair Arthur and I had picked out together decades ago, its worn velvet suddenly alien beneath my trembling fingers. The afternoon sun, usually a welcome solace, now spilled through the window like I saw Gary again, standing rigidly beside Brenda in court. His jaw, set and unyielding, was a chilling mirror of Arthur in his younger, more ambitious days. Brenda, usually a whirlwind of emotion, kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, avoiding my eyes, a silent testament to the vast, gaping chasm that had opened between us. There were no shouts, no dramatic tears, just the precise, almost surgical execution of a plan that had been unfolding, unseen, for far too long. They had built a wall of legal documents and dismissive phrases around me, brick by cold brick, until I was entirely walled off, a ghost in my own story. For nearly 40 years, my world spun around Arthur, his career, his schedules, his soaring ambitions. They became the very fabric of my existence. I remembered the dizzying excitement of our first big move, leaving behind the only town I'd ever known. "This is for us, Doris," Arthur had promised, his eyes alight with a future we'd build. For our future, for our children. And I, with a heart full of unwavering faith, believed him. My own quiet dreams, painting sun-drenched landscapes, learning to master the piano's keys, they were gently set aside, not forgotten, no, but deferred, always deferred. I was his steadfast partner, the silent architect of our home, nurturing our children, ensuring Arthur had the peace of mind to climb his corporate ladder without a backward glance. I held our family together through lean times, through Arthur's endless work trips, through Gary's stormy teenage years, and Brenda's fragile anxieties. Every scraped knee, every late-night homework session, every whispered secret shared in the quiet moments before sleep, I was there, always. When Arthur passed 5 years ago, I leaned on them. I believed they would be my continuation, my comfort, the strong hands that would guide me through the murky waters of grief. But the sorrow had barely settled. The last funeral flowers barely withered when their concerns began to surface. "Mother, the house is so large for just one person. Have you considered downsizing?" The questions, initially soft as a whisper, grew sharper, more insistent, each one a tiny chisel chipping away at my autonomy, at my precious sense of security. "Your investments, Mother, are they truly diversified? Perhaps we should take a look, just to be safe." They saw a woman aging, perhaps a little out of touch, and in that, they saw an opportunity. My quiet nature, my enduring patience, the years I'd spent deferring my own needs. They had perceived it all as monumental weakness, an open invitation for their relentless encroachment. The lawsuit, this agonizing legal battle, was the chilling crescendo of that long, drawn-out piece of music. They claimed I was no longer capable of managing Arthur's estate, that my decisions were erratic, that I was nothing more than a burden on their own burgeoning futures, their shiny new ambitions. The judge, swayed by their polished presentations, by the carefully curated anecdotes designed to paint me as frail and incompetent, had agreed. And with that, he had sanctioned their betrayal, making it legal, making it devastatingly absolute. My legacy, my very name, intertwined with Arthur's for decades, now belonged to them, to be carved up and distributed as they saw fit. I rose, my legs unsteady, and moved to the mantelpiece. My fingers traced the cool glass of a framed photograph. Arthur and I, young, beaming on our wedding day, a lifetime of promise captured in that single hopeful moment. Beside it, a faded picture of Gary and Brenda, barely out of kindergarten, their small hands clasped around my neck in a tight, trusting embrace, their faces split by innocent, joyful grins. The warmth of those memories, once a sacred comfort, now felt like a cruel trick, reminding me of a love that had, in their hearts, withered and died. This house, this very home I had poured my life into, felt cold, empty, a hollow echo of a family that was no more. A profound weariness settled over me, heavier than any physical exhaustion I had ever known. It was the weariness of a spirit bruised and battered by those it had cherished most deeply. They thought they had left me with nothing but broken memories and a handful of bills. They believed they had extinguished my light, leaving me stranded in the encroaching shadows of old age, adrift and forgotten. But as the last sliver of sunlight vanished from the window and the room was plunged into a quiet gloom, a strange, stubborn spark began to flicker deep within me. They were wrong. So terribly, fundamentally wrong. And as I stood there in the growing darkness, feeling the sharp sting of their betrayal, I couldn't help but wonder how much hidden strength can truly be forged in the crucible of such profound loss. The quiet gloom of the living room clung to me, but something beneath the searing pain refused to be extinguished. It wasn't anger, not yet, more like a stubborn ember deep in my chest, refusing to yield to the ashes of their betrayal. I moved slowly, my bare feet sinking into the thick carpet Arthur had insisted on, each step a dull thud against the heavy silence of the house. This was our home, the one we built, the one I transformed from a blueprint into a sanctuary, brick by painstaking brick. I paused by the bay window, running a hand over the smooth, cool glass. I could almost hear Arthur's booming laugh from decades ago, a ghost of a memory, as he held up paint swatches. "What about this one, Doris? A little bolder, don't you think?" I'd smiled, always deferring. "Whatever makes you happy, Arthur. It's your study, after all." His study. A room filled with his achievements, his leather-bound books, the scent of old paper and ambition. My own small easel, the brushes I'd bought with such excitement in my youth, had long since been relegated to the back of the garage, gathering dust beneath forgotten holiday decorations. I walked toward the kitchen, the heart of any home, where countless meals had been prepared, worries shared, and small victories celebrated. I saw Gary, as a boy, sitting at the counter, swinging his legs, pleading for one more cookie before bed, and Brenda, meticulously arranging her dolls for a tea party on the tiled floor. My world had revolved around their laughter, their needs, their futures. Every choice, every sacrifice felt justified through the prism of their happiness. I remembered selling Arthur's prized antique watch, the one his father had left him, to pay for Brenda's emergency appendectomy when our insurance barely covered it. Arthur was away on a vital business trip. "Don't worry him, Doris," I'd told myself. "He has enough on his plate." A quiet decision, one of many, made to smooth the path for everyone else. I ran a hand across the polished oak of the dining table. Arthur and I had bought it with our first bonus check. We'd dreamt of filling it with family, with grandchildren. It had been filled all right, but mostly with their demands. "Mum, can you co-sign this loan? It's just a temporary thing. Doris, we need help with the down payment. It's our dream home." My savings, meticulously built from years of careful budgeting, had been slowly, steadily drained, piece by piece, like sand through an hourglass. I never questioned, never demanded, always just gave, because that's what mothers did, didn't they? Or so I believed. Now, sitting alone at that same table, the silence felt deafening, a stark contrast to the bustling, loud, demanding life I had once cultivated. A growing bitterness, sharp and cold, began to churn within me. Had I been a fool? Had my unwavering patience simply been an open invitation for them to walk all over me, to take until there was nothing left? My reflection in the dark window pane showed a woman I barely recognized, lines etched deeper, eyes shadowed by a weariness that went beyond simple fatigue. It was the weariness of decades spent pouring myself out, only to find myself utterly empty. My gaze drifted to the corner of the living room, to Arthur's old mahogany desk. It remained untouched since his passing, a silent shrine to his meticulous nature. I'd never quite brought myself to sort through its contents. A faint memory, like a half-forgotten dream, nudged at me. Arthur, a few months before he passed, had spent hours at that desk, poring over documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. He'd looked up once, a strange, knowing smile on his face. "Doris," he'd said, his voice softer than usual. "I'm making sure you'll always be taken care of, properly taken care of." The words had seemed simple then, a husband's comforting promise. Now they felt like a puzzle, a whisper from the past, stirring a tiny, insistent flicker of curiosity. Could Arthur, my pragmatic, ambitious Arthur, have foreseen this day? And if so, what kind of provision could he have possibly made for a woman they had just deemed unworthy? The faint scent of aged paper and Arthur's subtle pipe tobacco clung to his mahogany desk, a ghost of his meticulous presence. My fingers brushed over the cool, polished wood, hesitating for a moment before I pulled open the top drawer. It slid with a soft groan, a sound that felt oddly intimate in the profound quiet of the house, as if the desk itself was unburdening a secret. Beneath neatly stacked ledgers and a fountain pen I recognized as his favorite, lay a thick, plain manila envelope. No name, no hint, just a slight, almost imperceptible bulge that drew my eye, pulling me in with an undeniable force. My heart hammered a slow, insistent rhythm against my ribs as I pulled it out. The paper felt heavy, important. Inside, a single, official-looking document. My name, Doris, was printed boldly at the top, followed by words that made no immediate sense. Deed of trust. The Doris, last name, legacy fund. My brow furrowed. A trust. I remembered Arthur discussing his will, his carefully planned estate that was now, thanks to Gary and Brenda, contested and carved up. But a legacy fund? Named after me? This was entirely new. I unfolded the document, my eyes scanning the dense legal text, picking out key phrases. Irrevocable charitable trust. Substantial assets. Established to support educational initiatives and community development. The words swirled, confusing at first, then coalesced into a stunning, unbelievable truth. This wasn't just a small endowment. This was a massive fund, set up years ago, long before his illness, long before the first hint of Gary and Brenda's entitlement, and it was unequivocally, legally, entirely in my name. Disbelief warred with a dawning, exhilarating surge of understanding. Arthur, my pragmatic, often reserved Arthur, while he built his empire and meticulously planned for our family's future. He had, in his own quiet way, also built this, a testament to my worth, a declaration of my legacy, separate from the one he shared with our children. He hadn't just made sure I'd be taken care of. He had given me a hidden arsenal, a power cloaked in philanthropy, completely unknown to anyone else, especially Gary and Brenda. A bitter, almost triumphant laugh bubbled up from deep within me. They had gone to court, spent thousands in legal fees, twisted facts, and painted me as a frail, incompetent woman to strip me bare, to disinherit me. They had successfully erased my financial standing, humiliated me, and then walked away, believing their victory was complete. Yet here, in the quiet heart of the home they thought they'd conquered, Arthur had secretly bestowed upon me a financial might that dwarfed anything they were squabbling over. The trembling in my hands wasn't from sorrow now, but from a burgeoning, almost electric realization of power. It wasn't just money, it was vindication. It was Arthur's silent, profound counter-argument to their every accusation. He hadn't just seen through their greed. He had provided me with the ultimate trump card. For years, I had been the selfless mother, the supportive wife, the silent strength behind everyone else's success. My voice had been muted, my needs pushed aside. But this fund, this incredible, unexpected revelation, gave me a voice louder than any lawyer's argument, a position stronger than any judge's gavel. I imagined Gary's face, Brenda's shocked eyes, if they ever learned of this. The thought sent a cold thrill down my spine. They thought they had left me with nothing but memories and a handful of bills. They believed they had extinguished my light, leaving me stranded in the encroaching shadows of old age, adrift and forgotten. But Arthur, in his final act of love and foresight, had ensured I had not just light, but a roaring fire. I smoothed the document with trembling fingers, the paper, a promise. They had played their hand. Now, it was time to play mine. What happens when the quietest player finds the ultimate trump card? The cold triumph of discovering Arthur's secret fund settled into a quiet hum of purpose, chasing the last vestiges of despair from my study. I stood there, the deed of trust clutched tight in my hand. No longer a discarded wife or a disinherited mother, but something far more potent. The paper felt solid, real. A silent promise whispered from beyond the grave. Gary and Brenda had ripped away what they thought was mine. But Arthur, in his wisdom, had built something untouchable. Something for me. The initial shock faded, replaced by a clarity I hadn't known in decades. This wasn't about revenge in the petty sense. This was about justice. It was about balance. They had taken my dignity, belittled my sacrifices, and sought to erase my very existence from our family's narrative. Now, I would meticulously, deliberately, rewrite it. My first move was to secure the document. I found an old, heavy-duty safe tucked away in the back of Arthur's wardrobe. Its combination long forgotten by me, but easily retrieved from a hidden note in his old diary. The click of the tumblers, the heavy thud of the door as it sealed the trust within, felt profoundly satisfying. It was a tangible act of reclaiming control, the first brick laid in my new foundation. Then came the research. My children, so focused on their outward appearances and their burgeoning futures, had left a digital trail as wide as a highway. I spent days at Arthur's desk, the desktop computer humming softly, a new kind of world opening up before me. Gary's social media was a gallery of his struggling tech startup, glossy photos of empty office spaces, posts about disrupting the market that garnered few likes, desperate calls for seed funding. His ambition, once a source of pride, now seemed a brittle facade. Brenda's online presence was all lavish trips, designer clothes, and expensive dinners. A life she clearly lived beyond her means. Her carefully curated image of effortless wealth showed cracks if you knew where to look, vague references to investment opportunities that never quite materialized, quiet complaints about unforeseen expenses. Every bit of their perceived strength was a potential weakness, meticulously documented for the world to see. I wasn't just looking, I was connecting the dots. Their need for constant external validation, their insatiable appetite for more, their belief that the world owed them. It all stemmed from the same place, a hollowness I hadn't truly seen until now. The more I learned, the less anger I felt, replaced by a quiet, steely resolve. It was an intellectual exercise, almost. A puzzle. And I, Doris, who had spent a lifetime in the background, was surprisingly good at solving puzzles. The next step was to find the right person to help me navigate this hidden power. Arthur's original attorney was out of the question. He'd sided with Gary and Brenda in the lawsuit. I needed someone discreet, sharp, and utterly untainted by my family's drama. After a week of careful searching, reviewing online profiles and discreet inquiries, I found Mr. Jenkins. He was a senior partner at a smaller, highly regarded firm specializing in complex trust management. His online biography spoke of a quiet dedication and a reputation for uncompromising discretion. Our first meeting took place not in his office, but in a neutral, upscale cafe, a bustling public space that offered anonymity. He was a man of precise movements, his eyes keen and intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses. I watched him over the rim of my coffee cup, assessing. He listened patiently as I, with a calm I didn't know I possessed, laid out the story of Arthur's fund and the recent lawsuit, omitting only the raw, personal pain. When I presented the deed of trust, his professional composure flickered. His brows rose, a small, involuntary gasp escaping his lips. "Mrs. last name," he said, his voice hushed. "This is extraordinary. A fund of this magnitude established so privately, in your name." His words confirmed it. Arthur had truly given me something immense. We spoke for nearly 2 hours. Mr. Jenkins, once he recovered from his surprise, explained the intricate legalities, the ways the fund could be utilized, the power it truly represented. He outlined strategies, explained the implications, and answered every question with a patient, clear expertise. He saw not a frail, disinherited woman, but a formidable client, a strategist, a woman with a clear objective. And I, for the first time in a very long time, felt truly seen for the strength I now possessed. Leaving the cafe, the city air felt crisp, invigorating. The weight of betrayal still lingered, a phantom ache, but now it was overshadowed by a building sense of anticipation. The pieces were falling into place. My mind was no longer consumed by grief, but by blueprints for a future I would define, and perhaps for a reckoning my children never saw coming. The silence in the study was no longer empty, but filled with the hum of a future I was about to meticulously construct. But how many people truly understand the quiet power of a woman who finally stops grieving what was lost and starts building what can be? The hum of Mr. Jenkins's voice, explaining legal avenues and financial instruments, had become the new rhythm of my days, a powerful counterpoint to the silence that once filled my home. My living room, once a sanctuary for grief, now hummed with a different kind of energy. Spread across the coffee table were printouts, charts of market trends, analyses of investment portfolios, and, most importantly, the strategic blueprint Mr. Jenkins and I had meticulously crafted. This wasn't just about money. It was about orchestrating a precise, almost surgical reclamation of balance. My first move was quiet. Through the Doris Legacy Fund, Mr. Jenkins initiated a series of calculated investments into niche sectors that Gary's tech startup, Apex Innovations, was subtly reliant on, then just as quickly pulled them back. It wasn't a direct attack, merely a shift in the currents, but in the unpredictable waters of the market, even a small ripple could capsize a shaky boat. I pictured Gary, hunched over his laptop, frowning at screens that suddenly flashed red instead of green, the frustration building in his jaw. Across town, Brenda's world felt the tremor next, through another series of strategic, market-driven adjustments, again orchestrated through the fund. A luxury real estate development she and her husband had heavily invested in suddenly faced unexpected liquidity issues, not a collapse, but a tightening. A sudden scarcity of buyers for their high-end units. Brenda, with her constant need for outward validation, thrived on the effortless flow of wealth. The sudden, inexplicable slowing of that flow, the subtle whispers of market uncertainty, would gnaw at her. I could almost hear her hushed phone calls, the forced cheer in her voice as she assured friends, "Oh, just a temporary snag, darling." I watched, not with glee, but with a detached fascination. My research, as Mr. Jenkins called it, now included checking industry news, quietly observing social media. Gary's once confident posts about Apex's inevitable success grew subtly defensive. He started posting cryptic quotes about perseverance in challenging times, a clear signal that the ground beneath him was shaking. Brenda's carefully curated feed showed fewer extravagant purchases, more mindful living rhetoric, a subtle shift in tone that spoke volumes. They were scrambling, trying to understand the invisible hand that suddenly seemed to be turning off their taps, but they had no idea whose hand it was. The satisfaction wasn't loud. It was a deep, quiet hum, like the steady pulse of a well-oiled machine. This wasn't the chaotic, emotional revenge of a heartbroken mother. It was the precise, strategic dismantling of a structure built on ingratitude. Every subtle tremor in their worlds was a confirmation of my own growing power, a testament to Arthur's profound foresight. They had stripped me of my dignity, but Arthur had given me the tools to reclaim it, brick by methodical brick. And as Gary's and Brenda's worlds began to subtly unravel, I found myself wondering how many people truly believe in an unseen force until it's already reshaping their very reality. The tremors I had sent through Gary and Brenda's carefully constructed worlds were no longer subtle whispers. They were now undeniable quakes. Apex Innovations, Gary's proud tech startup, began to bleed capital. Its once bright prospectus now a grim ledger of stalled projects and missed deadlines. He'd lost a major funding round, not to a competitor, but to an inexplicable shift in market confidence, a sudden chill that seemed to settle specifically around his venture. I pictured him, hunched over his laptop, his face strained, the frustration building in his jaw. His desperate calls to investors grew more frequent, his voice sharp and demanding even through the muffled receiver in his hand. Brenda, meanwhile, was unraveling in her own meticulously curated way. The luxury real estate development she championed, her grand statement of arrival, had hit a wall. Key permits were inexplicably delayed, vital loan commitments pulled back, all without clear explanation. Her social media, once a vibrant tableau of champagne toasts and grand openings, now featured forced smiles and vague hashtags about resilience. I imagined her pacing her gleaming kitchen, the polished marble cold beneath her designer slippers, rage simmering beneath her carefully applied calm, muttering to herself about unseen forces. Their confusion turned quickly to suspicion. Two separate, inexplicable financial setbacks hitting both of them, striking at their most vulnerable points. It was too much for coincidence. They sought a scapegoat, and soon, their gaze, sharp and narrowed, turned toward me. Their mother, the one they had just cast aside. The phone rang one crisp afternoon, Brenda's name flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice calm, almost detached. "Mother?" she began, her tone a practiced blend of concern and thinly veiled accusation. "Are you... well, Gary and we've been having some incredibly strange luck lately. Financial setbacks. Things that just don't make sense. And we were wondering if you've had any unusual activity with Arthur's old accounts? Any large transfers, perhaps?" A flicker of amusement, cold and swift, passed through me. They were fishing. Desperately. I remembered Gary's stone face in court, Brenda's averted eyes, refusing to meet mine as they stripped me of my dignity. "Brenda," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "As you and Gary were so keen to remind the court, I am no longer in control of Arthur's estate. Everything rests with you now, doesn't it? My finances are quite modest, as you well know. Perhaps you simply haven't diversified enough." Brenda's breath hitched. "Mother, this is not a game. Gary's business is failing. Our development is stuck. Did you somehow get access to funds you shouldn't have? Are you trying to punish us?" Her voice, usually so controlled, edged into a shrill, desperate whine. "After everything we did for you. After everything I did for you." The words hung unspoken in the air between us, a silent accusation more potent than any shout. "I am merely trying to live my own life, Brenda," I said, my voice unwavering. "As you so clearly wished me to do. Perhaps you should focus on your own affairs rather than speculating on mine." The line went silent, then she hung up with a sharp click. The air in my quiet kitchen felt suddenly charged, the battle lines drawn with chilling clarity. They wouldn't stop there. I knew it. Gary tried next, a terse, demanding voicemail left on my machine. "Mum, what the DMN hell are you doing? Apex is on the verge of collapse. This isn't a coincidence. You need to tell us what you know. Now. Or things will get much, much worse for you. I swear it." A knot tightened in my stomach. The thought of their relentless pursuit, their sheer ruthlessness, momentarily made the walls of my quiet home feel like they were closing in. For a fleeting second, a cold dread whispered through me. Had I overplayed my hand? Had Arthur's legacy, meant to protect me, now painted a target on my back, making me vulnerable to their escalating rage? The sheer magnitude of their entitlement, their willingness to lash out, was sobering. But then, the memory of that courtroom, of their cold, triumphant faces, surged back, hot and sharp, burning away the doubt. No, I hadn't come this far to falter. This was precisely the pressure I had anticipated. This was their true nature, exposed under duress. My resolve hardened, tempered by their malice. They wanted to know what I knew. Oh, they would learn, eventually, but it wouldn't be on their terms, nor would it be a confession freely given. What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted, and the prey has far more cunning than anyone imagined? The silence in my home after Gary's menacing voicemail was not calm, but a taut wire, humming with the promise of what was to come. They wanted me to break. They wanted me to concede. But the woman who had once quietly deferred was gone, replaced by someone tempered in the fires of their betrayal. Mr. Jenkins had presented the final phase of our plan, a move as precise as it was devastating, designed to strike at the very heart of their carefully constructed illusions. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when I arrived at the grand, glass-fronted building housing Gary's struggling Apex innovations. The lobby buzzed with a manufactured energy, young faces rushing past, trying to project success despite the whispered rumors of financial woes. I spotted Gary near a large, frosted glass conference room, his suit rumpled, a desperate edge to his usually confident posture. Brenda was there too, perched on a sleek, modern sofa, her designer handbag clutched tight, her face pale beneath her makeup. She caught my eye, a flicker of surprise and annoyance crossing her features, quickly masked by a strained, cold smile. "Mother?" Gary approached, his voice tight, laced with a familiar mix of irritation and forced civility. "What are you doing here?" "This is a private meeting." "Is it?" I asked, my voice calm, almost detached, yet it carried an unexpected authority that made him falter. "I believe it concerns Arthur's legacy. And that, Gary, involves me." Brenda stood, her eyes narrowed. "The court settled that, Doris. You have no claim here." "Oh, but I do," I replied, a subtle smile playing on my lips. My gaze flicked towards the conference room, where several stern-faced investors were already gathering around a large, gleaming table. This was Gary's make-or-break moment, his last plea for capital. The air inside vibrated with nervous tension. Just then, Mr. Jenkins appeared at my side, his presence a quiet but formidable reinforcement. He offered Gary a polite, professional nod. "Good morning, Mr. Sort last name." "Missy last name." "Mrs. last name and I are here on official business concerning the Doris last name legacy fund." Gary and Brenda exchanged a quick, bewildered glance. "The what?" Gary stammered, his brow furrowed in confusion. The subtle shift in the room's energy was palpable. Whispers started among the few passers-by. The Doris last name legacy fund, I repeated, enunciating each word clearly, watching their faces for a reaction. A charitable trust established by Arthur years ago. A substantial fund, specifically earmarked for philanthropic endeavors. Managed by myself, of course, as the sole trustee. I paused, letting the words sink in. And as of this morning, Mr. Jenkins and I have just initiated a series of divestments from several, shall we say, underperforming ventures, including, regrettably, some key interests in the very sectors that your own little startup, Gary, relies upon. Gary's face drained of colour. Brenda gasped, a small, choked sound. The casual murmur of the lobby faded into a stunned silence as their world began to tilt. You can't, Gary whispered, his voice cracking, the polished facade of the tech mogul crumbling before my eyes. That's economic warfare. No, Gary, I said, stepping closer, my voice clear and unwavering. That's merely smart financial management and a demonstration of who truly holds the power. I looked from Gary's horrified face to Brenda's wide, disbelieving eyes. You disinherited me. You cut me out of Arthur's estate, claiming I was incapable, a burden. You believed you had left me with nothing. But Arthur, in his wisdom, left me everything. A legacy in my name. And now, I am using it to ensure that the values he held, integrity, foresight, and genuine contribution, are upheld, not merely financial gain. The investors inside the conference room, alerted by the sudden tension, began to look out, their expressions curious, then alarmed as they recognized Gary's panic. The words, legacy fund and divestment, clearly reached them. This is not some petty act of spite, dear children, I continued, my voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. This is the price of ingratitude, the cost of betrayal. You wanted to carve up Arthur's estate. Fine, but you forgot that some legacies are built not on blood, but on quiet, undeniable strength. And that strength, Gary and Brenda, belongs to me. You thought you could erase me. You were wrong. I wasn't just your mother. I was, and still am, Arthur's legacy. And now, you will finally understand the true weight of that name. The subtle shift in the room's energy turned into a palpable tension. Gary's last hope for funding visibly crumbling. How many of us truly understand the silent power of a quiet woman until she finally speaks with the full force of her truth? Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The silence that followed my words in the gleaming lobby was more deafening than any shout, a vacuum into which Gary's hopes and Brenda's pretenses imploded. Gary stood frozen, his jaw slack, the colour completely drained from his face, as if he'd seen a ghost. Not just any ghost, but the spectre of his own colossal miscalculation, risen from the very ground he thought he'd bought and sold. Brenda, typically so adept at masking her true emotions behind a veneer of sophisticated calm, clutched her expensive handbag so tightly her knuckles were white. Her eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted between me, Mr. Jenkins, and the now peering faces of the investors inside the conference room. It was a tableau of utter public devastation. Mother, this is insane, Gary finally managed, his voice a strained whisper, ragged at the edges. You're fabricating this. The legacy fund? There's no such thing. Arthur's will was clear. He looked around frantically, as if seeking confirmation from the polished chrome and glass of his own office. The young Apex employees, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, pretended to busy themselves with their phones. But their subtle glances and hushed whispers betrayed their true fascination. Oh, but there is, Gary, I stated, my voice steady, unyielding, a stark contrast to his unraveling. I met his gaze directly, holding it, allowing him to see the resolve that had been forged in the very fires of his betrayal. It's been in existence for years, established by your father, specifically structured to bypass standard estate proceedings, ensuring its trustee had complete autonomy. And that trustee, my dear son, is me, solely me. I could see the dawning horror in his eyes as he absorbed the full implication. Not just that I had money, but that it was untouchable by his greedy hands and wielded by me. Mr. Jenkins, ever the professional, stepped forward, a slim leather-bound document already in his hand. "Mr. Last name, Ms. Last name," he said, his tone gravely polite. "For your information, and that of the assembled investors, the Doris Last Name Legacy Fund holds assets exceeding $300 million. Its primary purpose, as stipulated by its founder, Mr. Arthur Last Name, is to support educational and community initiatives with Mrs. Last Name as the perpetual, irrevocable trustee." He opened the document, displaying a notarized page, a meticulously drafted and legally sound entity, immune to any challenges from his primary estate or its heirs, thanks to Arthur's foresight. $300 million. The number hung in the air like a thunderclap. It wasn't just money. It was an echo of Arthur's unwavering faith in me, a testament to my worth that transcended their petty squabbles over inheritances. Gary visibly flinched, as if physically struck. The investors inside the conference room, those stern-faced men and women who held the fate of Apex Innovations in their hands, had now fully emerged from their meeting room, drawn by the escalating tension and the staggering figure Mr. Jenkins had just announced. Their expressions ranged from shock to immediate, keen interest, then quickly to a calculated withdrawal. They weren't interested in a family drama, certainly not one where a major player was now implicated in what looked like a hostile financial maneuver. Brenda, finally finding her voice, unleashed a desperate, high-pitched laugh that bordered on hysteria. "This is absurd! Mother, you're trying to ruin us! After everything we've done for you, how could you?" She sounded genuinely bewildered, as if she truly believed she was the victim here. The audacity of it, the sheer, unadulterated entitlement, was almost breathtaking. "Done for me?" I repeated, my voice now laced with a steely edge that cut through her fragile pretense. "You stripped me of my home, my peace, my very identity in that courtroom. You painted me as senile, as a burden, to seize what you believed was rightfully yours. You offered me pity when I deserved respect. You saw my quiet patience as weakness, my sacrifices as opportunities to exploit. You took everything, Brenda. And now you ask, how could I?" I looked at them both, their faces etched with a mix of fear and naked greed. "This isn't about ruin, dear children. This is about balance, about a debt finally being paid. You wanted to know what I knew? You just saw it." One of the lead investors, a sharp-suited woman with a severe bob, stepped forward. "Mr. Last Name," she addressed Gary, her voice crisp and professional, cutting through the emotional tension. "It appears there are significant and unforeseen complications regarding your financial backing. Given this situation, we will be reassessing our position. Effective immediately, Apex Innovations' funding review is suspended indefinitely. We'll be in touch." With a curt nod, she turned and led the other investors away, their footsteps echoing decisively as they walked towards the elevators, leaving Gary standing in the middle of his grand, empty lobby, his dreams crumbling around him. The look on Gary's face was one of absolute, unadulterated despair. His shoulders sagged, and he looked smaller, defeated, his polished facade finally shattered. Brenda stared after the retreating investors, her mouth agape, the carefully constructed world of luxury she had so desperately chased, now slipping through her fingers like sand. They stood there, two children suddenly stripped of their perceived power, exposed and vulnerable, in the very space where they had sought to solidify their dominance. It was a powerful, chilling image, a visual testament to the consequences of their actions. I turned to Mr. Jenkins, offering a subtle nod. "Thank you, Mr. Jenkins," I said, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling over me. I believe our work here is done. As we walked away, leaving Gary and Brenda in the debris of their ambitions, the weight lifted from my shoulders wasn't just the burden of their betrayal, but the decades of deferring my own self, the rage, the helplessness, the profound sorrow. They had been replaced by a quiet, fierce sense of justice. Arthur had not just given me a fund, he had given me back myself. He had shown me that my worth was inherent, not derived from their validation or recognition. I didn't stop to gloat, didn't utter another word. What was left to say? The truth, spoken with the quiet power of a woman finally reclaiming her voice, was more devastating than any shouted accusation. I looked back once, over my shoulder. Gary was still standing there, his head bowed. Brenda now weeping softly, mascara streaking her pale cheeks. They had their inheritance, the estate they had fought for. But they had lost something far more valuable, their future, their dignity, and the mother they had so carelessly discarded. In the months that followed, the Doris Legacy Fund truly began its work. We funded scholarships for students who otherwise wouldn't have had a chance, supported community centres in underserved areas, and established programs for elderly care. Each grant, each new initiative, was a quiet monument to Arthur's belief in genuine contribution and to my rediscovery of purpose. My home, once a hollow echo of a lost family, now felt full, brimming with a new kind of energy, a quiet hum of meaningful activity. I reopened my dusty art supplies, found a new piano teacher, and for the first time in years, felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't just Doris, the disinherited mother. I was Doris, the architect of a new legacy, my own legacy. The bitter taste of betrayal had finally been washed away by the sweet clarity of self-worth. It was never too late to reclaim your power, to find your voice, and to understand that the deepest wells of strength often lie hidden, waiting for the crucible of adversity to reveal them. What does true justice look like when it's delivered not with rage, but with quiet, undeniable power? Share your thoughts below. Your voice truly matters to us. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and unexpected transformation.